I'm going to start on the two near frontier open weight models that we saw in the last 7 days from China. One of them being Kimi, which has got a lot of attention and a lot of press, and then the other being Qwen from Alibaba. How significant were the two model announcements that we saw today, and what should we be taking from their seemingly catching up or close to with the frontier models we have in the West?
I mean, an eval is just an eval. So let's not take a bunch of folks on X who had someone in their engineering department look at some evals and write a tweet for them. Okay, like we're not saying something is similar in performance, maybe, but let's prove it in the field. Having said that, I mean, we can't even sign up new as consumers for Kimi because it's blocked. They have so much demand since this happened, right? Demand is literally, I don't know whether it's geometric or exponential, but it's so high we can come back to this next week when it opens up and I can use it on the consumer side even better. But I mean, I think there's a lot going on and there's a lot on politics and it's an aha moment and a wake up moment. On the other hand, it's not new. It's not new, right? I mean, if you look at open router data, half the traffic's through China created models. Even China models is a confusing term, right? They may well be hosted on, they may be hosted in the US, right? And when they have open weights, they may be, for all intents and purposes, truly open source models hosted in the US. But it's not new. It's just going to accelerate this. And that's why you see the stress. It's accelerating. And 50% instead of being niche or for tech forward folks or venture back folks, in a year it could be everybody, and that's material. Just being in the zone and even materially cheaper, it's just going to get more and more attention.
I totally agree with that, actually, Jason. I was curious to see what you'd say. Is that there wasn't you kind of led with what do these new models mean? I think Jason's cut's exactly right. It's exactly what you'd expect. It turns out there's 5 main Chinese kind of LLM companies and a bunch of followers. It turns out that, aggressively funded companies with smart engineers are just going to keep cranking through and building new models. And, they're not state of the art compared to the frontier models, but they're, 6-9 months behind, depending on how you measure it. So yeah, actually no new news about that. But Jason's right, quite a lot of fun news about how kind of parts of the US responded to that. We had the small p political response. So that's one dimension, the policy advisor for OpenAI, formerly from the Trump administration, making some comments on Twitter, leading to a wonderful firestorm that we'll absolutely talk about. That's one thread. And then another thread is just talking about what these models start to reveal about the economics of a model company. I mean, Jason hinted at it. We lump all these models in together, right? But let's take two. Some of the DeepSeek models you can run on your PC. Your Mac or on a laptop, right? Conversely, Kimi K3 is, I think, a 2.8 trillion parameter model. It's a huge honking thing. And, you need myriads of GPU just to run it. So they're not, quote unquote, the same thing. That's much more comparable in size and therefore in terms of compute capacity, US frontier models. So we can learn about, I think we'll kind of talk about the politics first and then maybe oddly enough talk about the inference implications and kind of as that goes into the opportunity for fireworks. So lots of kind of downstream implications, but zooming out, nothing amazingly surprising in the news that after 3 years of competent execution along a pretty defined trend, we now have 3 years and 3 months of competent execution around a pretty defined trend.
Do you think Washington should move to restrict access then to these Chinese models, or is Bill Gurley right in suggesting that we should let free markets do what free markets do best and we should not
I hadn't realized Bill had said that. There's something very pleasing about that, which I'll mention in just a second, right? Because one of the fun things about this policy dispute, it brings out the hater in everybody, right? And, Dean Ball said what he said, and then two people who can be controversial came down strongly on the other side, and I support them both. The first was David Sachs, the former AI czar, who basically said, this is rubbish, stop. And then the second one was Emil, whom you mentioned. What I like about that guy is that man knows how to hate. And one of his biggest hates for the last decade and a half has, of course, been Bill Gurley from his time at Uber. So I really find it, so if Bill and Emil are on the same side, saying, don't ban these models, then you got to know that there's got to be some truth in that. It's got to make you think, because that's an interesting lineup. But yeah, I think, and I actually just saw literally as I came on, and look, this is the Trump administration, so things change every day, but a Politico leak today basically saying some version of, we're not going to ban these things on any significant basis, which, as Jason points out, is very different than saying the White House decision support system will be run on Kimi, right? Even if it's Kimi hosted in California, I think we can take it for granted it won't be, right? But look, conversely, if you're Decagon and you're a startup doing inference on customer support queries for a very boring consumer product, there is no reason why you should pay marquee prices when something 10x cheaper is available. And it would be horribly bad policy to ban that.
Having said that, I don't think you're going to convince me there aren't some data export risks with China-based models. You're just not going to convince me based on what I've done with all our agents in building. And if you're not going to convince me, I don't think you're going to convince 99% of the world that there isn't some security leakage issue. It's already scary how much of our data we put into these closed source models in the US. It is scary. Here's Elon saying scam Altman every day to create distrust, right? We cannot understand what these models do. They are connected to the internet. We cannot, even if we have Fable read it and have it read it itself, I don't think you're going to convince most of us there isn't data export risk. And so I think that's going to lead to tighter constriction than this, leave everything open so we can compete in my portfolio company's benefit argument.
I think every CIO is being told right now, oh, don't worry, if you host it on-prem, you remove any security risks and the back door then is removed that could potentially be there. Why would you not be alleviated by that reassurance of on-prem would solve that solution? And why would you not be reassured?
Rory's more of a historian here than me. You can mock our regulatory bodies, but they're here to answer those questions for us. Is it safe to drink that cup of coffee? The American Heart Association, I think, just said 6 cups are safe now, right, this week. Now I know. Now I'm cool, right? I was a little worried about my caffeine consumption when we did a lot. No, seriously. I mean, I'm not sure they're right. Who has said my data is not being exported through the most complicated, borderline self-aware software of our lifetimes? Who can say that, especially, and I admit this can be triggering. There is a history of data export risk with Chinese products. I'm not confident there is, and just the internet telling a CIO I don't think is good enough. And if I were a CIO, it wouldn't be good enough to me if I thought my job was on the line. I don't want to take this risk, CIO of some Fortune 500 Global 2000 company, unless everyone. I don't know, man.